Welcome to the Bowhunter Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Now, here's your host, editor Christian Berg.
All right, welcome back to the Bowhunter Podcast. We are all bow hunting all the time, and today we are more bow hunting than ever because in my home state, the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there are going to be over a dozen additional days to get in the field this year because Pennsylvania, for the first time ever in the long history of starting out as one of the first 13 colonies, I would imagine, and then part of the original United States of America, is going to allow Sunday hunting. So to say that this is a long time in coming would be an understatement. So it's a pretty big deal if you're from PA. And I've got a couple guests with me today to discuss this momentous occasion. I'm going to start out by introducing you to Mr. Travis. I hope I pronounced this right. Is it Lau or Law, Travis?
It is Lau. It's a German name, rhymes with Frau.
Okay, Travis Lau, and you are the spokesman for the Pennsylvania Game Commission.
Correct.
All right, and then I have Mr. Nick Pinozzotto, who is the, oh gosh, Nick, am I going to get this right? Are you president, CEO? Are you both from the National Deer Association?
Yeah, I'm both. I'm not sure what that really means, but yes, president and CEO of National Deer Association.
Means you do the same work or double work for one salary.
I'll pass that on to my board. That's great.
And Nick, in addition to being that illustrious leader of the NDA, you're a fellow Pennsylvanian.
I am. Yes. Great to be having this conversation. Long time in coming, like you said.
Absolutely. And you know, there's a lot of implications for this for the bow hunting community, I think, and I look forward to diving into some of that. But before we do, I just want to kick it to you, Travis, to kind of set the background. How long has this been like, am I right on that? Like, we never hunted Sundays, like ever, right?
Right. As far as I can tell, as far as anybody can tell, you know, whatever year that was in the 1800s prior to the establishment of the Game Commission, may have been in the 1870s sometime, where there was a sort of long list of hunting and game laws passed. And then, of course, the problem was there was nobody around to enforce it. But even then, in the 1800s, Sunday hunting was prohibited, and that's where we've stood. You know, there is still, until September 7th, a broad prohibition on Sunday hunting in Pennsylvania. Now, we've had limited Sunday hunting. We've long had opportunities to hunt foxes, coyotes, and crows in open seasons. And then for the past 6 years, we've had 3 additional Sundays where other game that's in season largely has been open to hunt. But outside of that, there hasn't been Sunday hunting opportunity. And with all of those Sunday hunting opportunities that we've had, they've all been a product of legislation, because the prohibition on Sunday hunting was written into the law. It took legislation to add more Sundays to any hunting season. It's not as if our board could just do it when they open up seasons and bag limits each year.
Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar with PA, so we have a game commission and there's a board of commissioners, and there are certain things that the board of game commissioners can do each year, like setting season dates and bag limits and things like that, the number of antlerless licenses that are available. But there are other things that are literally written into the legislative code, the laws of Pennsylvania, if you will, and the board of game commissioners does not have the authority to make and enact law. So if there's something that's codified in law, that's going to take a legislative act to change that. Now, before we get into all the changes and the role that so many people played into that, what's the genesis of all this? Again, I think for people maybe who live in the Midwest and the West, the parts of the country that aren't as steeped in tradition, if you want to call it that, as those of us in, the colonial era, blue laws, they were typically referred to as blue laws. And if you think about growing up, if you're of a certain age, maybe you remember the days that you couldn't go shopping on a Sunday, you couldn't go to a movie, you certainly couldn't buy beer or wine or any other liquor. And so there couldn't buy a car. You still can't buy a car on Sundays in Pennsylvania. So there are actually vestiges of these blue laws, which probably were rooted, somewhat in religion, somewhat in tradition, somewhat in this idea that Sunday is the Sabbath and it's a day of rest, and there's all these things that we shouldn't do. But of course, almost all of those things fell by the wayside over the course of the last couple of generations, Travis. I mean, think about if you wouldn't be able to go to the grocery store on a Sunday. And yet here we are in 2025, and we're just finally getting the opportunity to go out and hunt a deer or a turkey or a squirrel on a Sunday.
Yeah, and it has been a long time coming, and the push for expanded Sunday hunting has been unfolding for decades as well. And those limited opportunities that are a product of previous legislation have sort of ramped us up to this moment. And I think that last year we were fairly close to getting Sunday hunting, that the repeal of that broad prohibition lifted once and for all. There was legislation that was introduced. It had momentum behind it. It was moving forward, and then the legislative session ended. So the clock sort of ran out on last year's legislation. Because it was a brand new session, new legislation needed to be introduced. There were identical bills introduced in both the PA House and Senate, and it was the House bill that got moving first. And then when it moved, it really moved fast. That bill was voted out of committee on June 3rd, and by July 9th, the governor was signing it into law. So after all of those decades and all of this waiting, when Sunday hunting finally got done in Pennsylvania, it got done in almost the blink of an eye. And I think one of the things that might have changed the initiative to expand Sunday hunting this year, that might have been a change this year as compared to previous efforts, is the sort of the extent of the coalition in support of Sunday hunting. And important to that, it wasn't just the Game Commission there, it wasn't just hunting groups or conservation groups, but the agricultural community supported Sunday hunting. And I think that was a big step. Whatever the case, the time was right, and we look forward to seeing these expanded opportunities this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nick, I want to bring you in because, the National Deer Association was among, quite a number of different sportsmen's groups, conservation organizations, and as Travis mentioned, the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, which is actually pretty ironic because back in my former life, before I came to Outdoor Sportsman Group 17 years ago. I was an outdoor writer here in Pennsylvania. And at the time that I was covering the hunting landscape on a state level here, the Farm Bureau was the single biggest impediment to the expansion of Sunday hunting of any force in the state because the farming agriculture is the number one industry, I believe, in Pennsylvania, and the Farm Bureau's got pretty good connections there in the state house. And what they didn't want probably didn't have a great chance of passing, and they blocked this for a long time, Nick. But it's amazing what more deer mouths to feed and increasing crop damage will do to somebody's position. And here we are, but it was certainly a long time to make this change.
Yeah, and Travis articulated how this all came to be very well. I mean, he covered it. It was a really broad coalition over a long period of time that really led to this. I don't want to demonize the Farm Bureau. They had the reasons for why, they weren't interested in Sunday hunting for a while, and times change and people change, and they got on board with it. That certainly was a huge help. Um, But I just want to give a shout out to the sportsmen and women of Pennsylvania as well, because my organization and others like it, we can put out tons of action alerts. And if they don't actually do them and follow through and contact their legislators, then it doesn't happen. And so it was interesting as this was unfolding. We were quiet on purpose to not. We didn't want to step up and say, we're taking credit for saving Sunday hunting. We were just part of a very big mechanism of people. Some of the organizations involved with it didn't even exist whenever these conversations, started to get rolling many years ago, decades ago. And so it took all hands pushing from all different directions, the support of the Pennsylvania Game Commission, the commissioners. But really, I just want to credit the sports people of Pennsylvania for seeing this through and saying, we want this additional opportunity. Also, want to thank the Farm Bureau for coming around to the idea, and the legislators that penned the law. So there was a lot of things that happened there, and it all ended in a good spot for us, I think.
Absolutely. And, for all of you who are watching or listening today, I want to remind you as we have this discussion about the expansion of Sunday hunting in Pennsylvania that the Bowhunter podcast is brought to you by Lancaster Archery Supply. For all your bow hunting needs, visit lancasterarchery.com. They've got the gear, they've got the knowledge, and they've got the passion. And speaking of passion, Travis, my passion obviously is bow hunting. And we know that the opening day of the archery deer season statewide is coming up in just a little over a month now. I believe it's the first Saturday in October. And let's dive into some of the practical implications of this change. What does this mean for Pennsylvania archery deer hunters? Not only residents but non-residents, which I think this is a really big deal for that. And I want to talk about that a little bit, but just kind of lay out the framework, because just because this law was changed, and I don't want to get bogged down in the process, but this really just transferred authority to the commissioners. Just because the prohibition was removed for law, you guys wouldn't necessarily have had to open the floodgates right off the bat, especially since you had, the digests printed for this year and everything. So the commissioners had to make a decision as to how they were going to handle this. And I can only speak for myself, I guess. But I was really glad to see that they pretty well opened it up, right away here starting for this fall.
Yeah, it was clearly going to be a challenge as the bill that brought us expanded Sunday hunting got closer to the finish line, and it became clear that this was going to pass, and we would have the opportunity to implement it this year. I mean, that was sort of job one for the Game Commission. We wanted to get these opportunities to hunters this year, and not wait until next year just because it was maybe the easier thing to do. As you mentioned, I guess just to back up and explain that our season setting process usually begins in January. It did this past January, where the commissioners will preliminarily approve the seasons and bag limits for the coming year. There's another vote in April where those are finalized. Our license sales begin in late June. Our new license year starts July 1. So all of those things had already happened by the time the Sunday hunting bill was signed into law. That we began license sales for the new year, that the people who were buying their licenses were getting the digest that had the seasons that were approved in April that largely were absent Sunday hunting opportunity. So that's a challenge. It's also a challenge to implement Sunday hunting when seasons are already established, because those seasons, for in some cases may be maxed out already as far as potential impacts on wildlife. So there was a lot of work to do on the fly to make things happen for this year. But that was the direction that the Game Commission wanted to head in. So it took some creative thinking to get it done, in describing the regular seasons and bags process. That's a two-step process. If we were to implement Sunday hunting by regulation And given that the law won't take effect until September 7th, we'd be looking at having to have 2 advertised meetings, having publication of the decision, and likely wouldn't be able to offer Sunday hunting opportunity until mid-November, which is a time that a lot of our fall hunting is already behind us. And then we're also on the doorstep of these Sundays that have already been approved through the 3 Sundays that we had. So it was all hands on deck. It was a different way to approach things, where our board by resolution adopted these 13 Sundays between starting September 14th and ending December 7th, which is the last Sunday within the firearms deer season. Within that span, if it's in season, you can hunt it on a Sunday. And through that resolution, they directed our executive director, Steve Smith, to implement the new Sunday opportunities by executive order, which was an option that worked well in this case.
Yeah. So, and I just want to take a moment, because let's face it, you guys are probably everybody's favorite agency to criticize. And it's not always an enviable position to be in. But I will say in this case, just again, as one Pennsylvania hunter, I commend you for the way that you handled this, because, Nick, I'll let you chime in. That's literally, like, think about all those Sundays in the second half of October and all through the month of November. Tell me those aren't going to be some of the most prime possible days to be in the PA whitetail woods this fall.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I was maybe hunting as an avid archery hunter, as you know, Christian. It seemed like the Sunday was always nicer than the Saturday. And so, this eliminates that problem for a lot of people, whether that was actually true or not. The grass is always greener, as they say. But I think it's just nice to have the option, right? And the commission was very savvy in how they were able to roll this out, because if you can imagine, and you guys are both communicators, you know this, had the legislature cleared the way for Sunday hunting and then the commission follow up and say, but yeah, we're going to wait till next year. There would have been pitchforks and fire on the way to Harrisburg, and because people wouldn't want to understand the subtleties of the details. And so they avoided all that in a unique way, as Travis pointed out. And I think that just made for a really smooth transition. And, the funny thing is, a year or two from now, we'll look back and say something like, remember whenever we couldn't hunt on Sunday? And it'll just be something that we do now. So I think we're all looking forward to that, to be honest with you, the new normal.
Absolutely. And Nick, let's follow up on something else that Travis said, and that's the impact on the resource. Because obviously now you're adding, gosh, probably at least 10 or more total deer hunting days statewide this year. And, obviously National Deer Association is a conservation group. You have great, care for deer habitat and deer populations and the health of it and the management of it. So, any concerns on your end from that standpoint? I'm sure you've heard from at least somebody out there who says now we're going to kill too many deer.
Yeah, we've heard from some of our own members, that are concerned. And, it's funny that they don't usually, that's not the direction they usually go. They just like the tradition of not hunting on Sunday. And I get it. However, listen, we track through our deer report, deer harvest all across the country. And somehow, some way, all these other states that have Sunday hunting haven't run out of deer. And, in Pennsylvania, frankly, we could stand to shoot quite a few more. There are many areas in this state that are well overpopulated. We are, unfortunately, a disease state with CWD, also seeing some EHD reports starting to come in some different places. And that, there's nothing diseases like more than overpopulated populations, because they thrive in that environment. So we got to shoot some more deer. And so I think it'll help a little bit with that. But the reality is, we manage things through tag allocation here, and that hasn't changed. And we're not going to see, I think, very little change in the number of deer harvested, just based on what we've seen all across the country. It's not always just about the amount of opportunity as it relates to the number of deer that are harvested. And I think people get that confused a little bit. I mean, you you'll remember, I know this is the Bowhunter podcast, but the same thing whenever crossbows became legal, that was going to impact the resource. And every time you make a change like that, I think that's a sentiment you're going to hear. But the reality is we have stacks of data that show that that's just not the case. And I'm not at all concerned about that here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, Travis, you can probably provide a little bit more context, but I'll set you up with this. To add to what Nick said, when you look at deer hunters and you look at the data you have in terms of harvest and participation, we can see it clearly. If you look at the crossbow and you look at something that we actually talked about extensively in the office, and I've touched on it in other podcasts because I think it's such a fascinating demographic shift. What we've seen in Pennsylvania is that we've taken essentially the same deer harvest and we've moved the timing of it greatly. And the crossbow is a perfect example of that. Last year, for the very first time in Pennsylvania history, there were more bucks taken during archery seasons than there were during firearms seasons. And of those archery bucks, and it was very, very close, like the archery buck harvest, like it was like 51-49, if I recall. But of those archery bucks, 66% or 2 out of every 3 were taken with a crossbow as opposed to a vertical bow. And that tracks, or might have been 69. You can correct me, Travis, but point being, about roughly 70% of our archery season participation now here every year in Pennsylvania are crossbow hunters. So that's actually crazy when you think about the fact that like 20 years ago, these things weren't even widely legal for use. So when you talk about that as relates to adding these days, it doesn't matter to you as a commission, Travis, right? Whether somebody kills a deer the first week in November, the first week in October, the first week in December, at the end of the year, it's a dead deer.
Yeah, I think that you're right on that. And I think with deer harvest and potential impacts on deer, you have a lot of protections in the way that your license are issued. Our antlerless deer are managed by Wildlife Management Unit, which is usually a group of several counties or parts of counties, areas of like habitat, and within that unit, a number that seeks to reach a particular objective, either to increase, decrease, or hold steady the population. The appropriate number of tags is allocated. So you have a lot of protection against overharvest through that. I think with the situation that we're in this year, and as I would see it from my chair, the impacts for other wildlife species were maybe more possible or more likely a reality than they were for deer. But even so, when you're talking about adding Sundays to already established seasons, what could happen there, because we do anticipate Sundays to be high participation days. That's kind of the point in the whole thing, that you could change the success rate for your tags. When you allocate that number of tags available, it's based on what you know about how many tags it takes for a hunter to harvest one antlerless deer. So that could change with Sundays, probably not drastically in the way that it was rolled out. The fact that Sundays were only opened up in this first year between September 14th and December 7th, and the later seasons were left out of it, is a further protection against overharvest for some species where you might have a concern. In the end, and if you watch that process unfold or watch the live stream of the commissioners meeting, we were comfortable in adding Sundays where we did within those weeks. When it came to the seasons after deer season, there were some concerns expressed about adding Sundays, in particular for spring gobbler. So, but next year, I think things will look a good bit different when the board comes to the table in January, and for the first time has the ability to set seasons with Sundays as part of them. And I think that we may see some additional opportunity next year, but some of it will depend on what we know about those wildlife populations after this year's hunting season.
Yeah, you guys can take a look at things and you can tweak and pivot as you need to. Now, I want everybody to stick around because I think that the last segment is going to be extremely interesting when it comes to what I think this means for all of you who don't live in Pennsylvania. However, there's one more thing I want to touch on specifically as relates to this change from a demographic standpoint, and that's hunter recruitment. I know one of the things that was talked about a lot, for instance, with the crossbow again, was that it was going to be a hunter recruitment tool. I think we have enough data now to look back and say that it was probably a great hunter recruitment tool if you were talking about archery stamp sales, because we moved a lot of firearms hunters into the archery season. But I don't know if we can definitively say that it was a particularly incredible tool in terms of bringing new people into hunting, because we unfortunately continue to see a slow, steady erosion of hunter numbers, not just in Pennsylvania, but nationwide. And I know, I don't know if you have updated numbers, Travis, but the last report I saw for Pennsylvania, you guys were trending like 16% down year over year. I don't know if that's gap has closed up a little bit, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are as an agency. And Nick, you can chime in, from an organizational standpoint. Like, is this going to be helpful to us in terms of trying to hold on to the hunters that we have and maybe introduce some new people to the sport?
I think it has that potential, and I think that that's some of the reason it was supported as widely as it was, the move for expanded Sunday hunting, that there was recognition within the legislature um, about the important role that hunters play in managing our wildlife populations, and it's important to keep them engaged. Sunday hunting's a way to do that. We know from our previous research that when hunters stop hunting, the lack of time is a top reason. And providing more time through providing hunting opportunity on a day of the calendar when it previously wasn't allowed goes a long way to keeping hunters engaged and keeping them performing that vital role in wildlife management.
Yeah, Nick, you want to add
Yeah,
anything?
yeah, I think Travis really got it there, but I'll just add, I think more than anything, more than a recruitment tool for new hunters, because they don't know what they don't know anyway, and with regard to opportunity and days they can hunt and whatnot. But I think retention of hunters, um, I think one of the things, especially my world, is deer hunting, right? So deer and deer management. Whether or not we want to believe it or not, the reality is most deer hunters are pretty casual deer hunters. Okay, they're going to buy their license every year. They're going to go out opening weekend, maybe. Most of them will, hopefully dust the rifle off a week or so before a season and take a shot, make sure everything's in line. And then that's it. And it's easiest for those types of folks to say, I really only got out one day last year. Do I need to buy a license this year? And so that group of constituents that the Game Commission has and that we have as wildlife managers is very important, because even if they're casual, they're still shooting a heck of a lot of deer that we need taken off the landscape, and they're also buying hunting licenses and they're buying gear. And so I think that is equally important. I'm not sure how. I guess it'd have to be through some survey work to break it out. But as this goes on for a couple of years, I think it'd be really interesting to see who stayed in hunting because of the increased opportunity. And I also think about young kids too, and not to belabor the point, but if I'm a 12 or 14-year-old and currently I've been missing the opportunity to hunt on Sunday because I've been at baseball or football or whatever, and then all of a sudden now I do get that extra day to hunt. That's another impression on me as a young hunter and another reason for me to continue. And so I think about that as well. I'll put it to you this way. I just don't see there's no negative. Like, we're not going to lose hunters now because we have Sunday hunting. And so I think anything we can add is a bonus.
Yeah, because there's no requirement that you hunt on Sunday, right, Travis? If I'm amongst those people who's not interested in hunting on Sunday, no game warden is going to bang on my door and tell me that I must go in the woods, right?
Yeah, yeah, maybe if you're staying at my camp, you'll get an earful, but that's about it.
Well, the last sort of aspect to this that I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to say right up front, I guess this is going to make me a hypocrite because if you listen to this podcast a lot or you just know me, you know that because I'm spoiled, because I work in this industry, because I have opportunities to travel to a lot of states and hunt deer, I can be somewhat critical of the Commonwealth here just because of all the people that we have, Travis, all the hunting pressure, and how challenging it can make my deer hunts, relative to other places. I always say, that whenever I go to Iowa or Ohio or, Kentucky or whatever, I become a much smarter deer hunter, and of course, that's a joke because I don't become any smarter. And yet I find that my success rate increases. And it's a simple fact that if you want to shoot bigger bucks, you have to hunt where there are more bigger bucks, and it's harder to do. And the big bucks that we have tend to be a little more cagey because of the hunting pressure. However, all that being said, I am now going to contradict myself, Nick. And Nick knows this to be true. He can't argue with me because he's been killing some really nice deer here in Pennsylvania in recent years. If you follow him on social media, you can verify that for yourself. I am going to actually say that for all you people who live in the Northeast, and let's face it, we're the most heavily populated region in the country, and there are more bow hunters, that live here, than anywhere else. We all love to jump in the truck and go to Ohio or go to Illinois or go to Nebraska or Kansas. I'm telling you, if you live in New England, if you live in the lower mid Atlantic, you may actually want to start looking at coming to Pennsylvania as a non resident hunter. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we have one of the best values in non resident license fees. What's it cost a guy to get a non resident license right now, Travis?
I believe it's $101.97.
And that includes a buck tag.
Correct, as well as a turkey tag and your small game hunting privileges.
And all you'd need on top of that to come bow hunt here is an archery stamp, which is what, $16?
Correct.
Yeah. So that's a great value when you look at the fact that it costs, again, I like to go to Kansas, but I like to go to Illinois, but it's about $400 or $500 for each one of those tags. So you'd have that. Second of all, Travis, you don't have to enter a lottery or get points or anything. You can buy a non-resident tag here over the counter every year.
Correct. And then you're probably getting to my favorite point,
which is
the wealth of public land we have here in Pennsylvania.
That is where I was going. Yeah. How many millions of acres when you take into account, well, first of all, just the game lands is 2 point something million, right?
1.5 and change.
Okay. So that's 1.5 million acres. That's only the land that's managed and owned directly by our state wildlife agency. And all that is open to you for the price of $101 plus an archery stamp.
Correct. And then we have a wealth of state forest land, state parks, national forest land, and other federal property. So in total, it's over 3 million acres of public land here in Pennsylvania that's open to hunting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have on the Game Commission website some great mapping tools, in addition to your onyxes and your hunt stands and all those commercial tools that are available out there. The Game Commission website has great tools where you can go and you can see exactly where all these public lands are located. You can look at the aerial maps, all that stuff. So a lot of resources, Travis.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I think that we've made great strides in recent years in sort of upgrading what we're able to offer hunters in tools like these, and making them more available. So no, that's something we're proud of.
And another thing that I really have to mention, and Nick, you can tell me if you agree with me and what it's like, and because you're more in like the north central part of the state, I think, relative to me. I'm sort of in eastern central PA, but I can tell you in my area, like I just tell you, I live in Wildlife Management Unit 4C. If you want to shoot deer, if you're happy shooting a doe, now I don't know if there's any, unfortunately, I don't know if there's antlerless licenses left at this point, Travis, but there are probably DMAP tags for different tracts of state forest and things like that. But if you couldn't come to WMU 4C and just kill a deer to survive if you had to, you stink as a deer hunter, because our deer population is incredible right now. Like, I can't tell you, Travis, you can't get in the truck and drive anywhere around the forests and farmland of WMU 4C without seeing deer. I had a guy come up from Kentucky a few weeks ago to film, a cameraman that works for us. And I was filming some video segments about these new speed broadheads that were coming out, but I brought him over to one of the farms where I hunt to film these video segments. And I'm telling you, just driving from my house to that farm and back again, there were so many deer, and he couldn't believe it. It was high noon or early afternoon when we were coming back, and it was a bluebird sunny day, and there were does and fawns out on the bean fields in the middle of the day. And I was like, man, this deer population is robust. Nick, to your point, we're probably, unfortunately, like I am a little worried, we're probably primed for a really bad EHD outbreak if we get some infection going. But point is, there's a lot of deer in Pennsylvania, and we want you to come kill some, right, Nick?
Yeah, I'm going to be careful how I say that. I might have some locals get on my case here. I start inviting everybody from around the country. But no, I mean, here's the reality. I, like you, Christian, have had the fortune of hunting a lot of different places in the country. Actually, I think you and I hunted together for turkeys in Nebraska one time. I think that's where we were. But anyway, at this point, I really love hunting the mountains here in Pennsylvania. I live in Indiana County. There's a ton of public land here in the county. Matter of fact, just last season, I located very quickly and easily a really nice deer on game lands that my brother came in and got a chance at. There are nice deer here. There are a lot of deer here. I'm not going to sit here and kid anybody. It's not the same. I lived in Ohio for a while. It's not. There aren't 140s behind every tree, but they're there. And so this is really such a great place to hunt deer that I really don't go anywhere anymore. I'm just so satisfied with the experience that I get here. Ample tags. Um, Unfortunately, I'm in a CWD area, but the fortunate part of that is I've got lots of opportunities for tags. You do a lot of hunting. I try to do my part that way. I do still go to Delaware every year, and I've got friendships over there and hunt over on the coast in the Great Cypress Swamp. That's a whole other experience. But at the end of the day, if I could only hunt one place, it would be here in Pennsylvania. And so beyond the hunting too, there are just so many other great experiences here. Just the viewscapes. This is a wild and scenic state, and we're very fortunate here. And so I would just say, yeah, I mean, I invite people to come here to hunt, to fish, and just see what Pennsylvania is all about, because we got a good thing going here, and it'd be sad not to share it at least a little bit with some others.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the truth is it's gotten, considerably better over the last 20 years because of a lot of the management things that the Game Commission has done. And then just the fact that we do have, I mean, let's face it, yes, numbers are down. And a lot of the hunters that we do have, Travis, they're not as young as they used to be. I'm not as young as I was yesterday either. And yeah, none of us are. But if you look to the future in Pennsylvania, honestly, as a deer hunter, you would have to say it's a very bright future because, as hunter numbers decline, and if they do continue to decline, the opportunity is going to become immense because you're going to have to make a more efficient use of the limited resource that you have in us as hunters, Travis.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, in the uh, sort of the picture that you painted in your experience and so many deer in the field and whatnot, it's like, I think that as hunters in Pennsylvania, we do have a responsibility to manage our deer resource, and that's going to include antlerless harvest. So with fewer people to join in on that, I think it's important that we all make that a focus and part of what we do here. But you're right on the opportunity. It's like you wouldn't want to head on out day after day if the deer weren't there. You want to give yourself a good shot. And then I think when you're talking about Pennsylvania being an attractive hunting opportunity, let's not leave bears out either, because our bear population is special here, and our bear hunting opportunity here may be the best in the nation.
Yeah, and for those of you who are my fellow bow hunters, you should also know that not only can you buy a regular hunting license and an archery stamp over the counter, but you can buy a Pennsylvania bear license over the counter. No lotteries, no points. I think that's like 16 or $20 too, right, Travis?
For a resident, I'm not sure what it costs for non-residents without checking, but no, clearly affordable.
Yeah, it's nothing crazy, and if you've got one of those, I also want to make sure you know there's a portion of the archery season for deer that's going to overlap with archery season for bears. So if you do come here and you're in an area where you know that there's some bears, why not grab one of those bear tags too? Because you know what happens when you don't buy it, Nick, is you're in the tree and a really nice boar comes right past at about 24 yards, and you just have to watch them walk right on by.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a great population of bears. Matter of fact, this year, probably more than I've ever seen, and I'm encountering them. I was out doing some food plot work the other day and came about 30 yards from a bear that I know is over 500 pounds. Now, I've known that bear to be out there for several years, but chances of seeing them when it's time to hunt, are about zero until that time. Like you said, Christian, you don't have a license in your pocket. And so, yes, we do have a tremendous bear population here in the state. And I love the new opportunities that we've been given in recent years as archery hunters and muzzleloader folks to get after them, because they're a tremendous species to hunt.
Yeah. And so, lots of reasons. I think we've given you hopefully a bunch of compelling reasons if you haven't checked Pennsylvania out before, because you listen to guys like me who tell you how hard it is here. The truth is, I've been sandbagging you all just a little bit because, to Nick's point, not only do we have a pretty good overall population of deer right now, but there are some really nice bucks out there. Probably not going to be quite as easy to kill as your older age class bucks in some of those states that just don't see the hunting pressure we do. Because Pennsylvania, oh, another joke. This is a random factoid, Travis, but I always like to say, when people are putting together, I'm in the outdoor media, so we like to make lists, right, for clicks and interest, the top 10 this, the top 10 that. I'm like, well, Pennsylvania is number one in hunting. And everyone's like, no, what are you talking about? I said, yes, number one in overall hunter density and bow hunter density in America. I said, that's not the categories that you want to be number one in, but we are number one, and nobody can take that away from us. So we've got that. But with this Sundays, it's so huge because, quite frankly, it's a hard sell to get these local, because I don't know if we're going to get a lot of people coming here from Kansas, Travis, or Oklahoma. But like I said, I think for the guys from New Jersey and Maryland and Delaware and New York State and West Virginia, with the Sundays now, you can justify the non-resident license purchase, because now you can take a Friday or a Monday off of work, and for one vacation day, you're going to give yourself 3 full days to hunt, and it's so much more worthwhile.
Right. And I think, like, even if we're not talking about non-residents coming to Pennsylvania, it makes a difference for people like me who have a camp, because there's much more incentive for me to make a weekend trip if I can get 2 hunting days out of it as opposed to one. And I think that that's the reality. And I hope that I can make that happen in the coming season and make a few more trips to camp. But I think that there are a lot of people in that category too. I think it lumps together under traveling to hunt. When there are more days to hunt as part of that trip, it's a plus.
Yeah, it's easier for you to justify the gas and the time and all that.
Sure thing.
Uh, um, so to wrap it up, I would say this, maybe, hopefully you found today's episode really interesting, but maybe you're thinking, man, they spent all this time and they're just talking about one state, Pennsylvania. But remember what I just told you, kids. We lead in so many ways. Pennsylvania is called the Keystone State, and we really are a keystone state for our sport because nobody exports more hunters to other states every year, and nobody keeps outfitters in business like the Pennsylvania hunter does. And I guarantee you, if you've ever been to a deer camp, or you went on a hog hunt in Texas, or you went on an Osceola turkey hunt in Florida, when you're in lodges all around the country, you run into Pennsylvania hunters because we have a hunting culture here, Nick, like nowhere else. And I'm excited about this Sunday hunting thing because as much as I get frustrated sometimes about how hard it is to kill good bucks around here, I also really appreciate the fact that I was blessed to become a hunter because I lived in Pennsylvania, because I had good buddies who were into hunting, because I came as an adult shortly after college, because I grew up in Rhode Island. I'm from Southern New England. I really didn't come from a hunting culture. And it's the Pennsylvania hunting culture that lit the fuse of my outdoor passion and eventually allowed me to transition my career full time into being able to pursue that passion. So what's good for Pennsylvania is good for hunting as a whole and is good for bow hunting. And that's my story, Nick, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, I'm right there with you. As you know, in our hunting and outdoors industry, it is loaded with Pennsylvanians. I could list probably 20 right now, and some pretty significant names in that list. But no, I mean, I'm glad that I grew up here and that I cut my teeth hunting here. And I can tell people, and Christian, you'll appreciate this. If you can have success in Penn's Woods, it has been easier everywhere else to me. No offense to my friends in the Midwest, but I'll tell you, when I lived in Ohio, I knew if I just sat in the right fence row long enough, I was going to kill a big deer. And I did every year, and it was pretty easy. Uh, Easy being a relative term, as compared to trying to do it here in our hills and valleys here in Pennsylvania, whether that be a turkey, a deer, or anything for that matter. They're pressured. They've got a lot of advantages, and it is difficult. So if you're listening to this and you're having success here, you're doing it right. And if you're not from the area and you're hearing this, come give it a shot. And I think you'll be in for a treat for sure.
Yeah. And last thing, Nick, before we wrap up, I want to give you and Travis, we'll start with you, a chance to plug your organization and tell people give me your 30-second elevator pitch for the National Deer Association and how folks can check out more and get involved.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Christian. So the simplest way is deerassociation.com. If you're still doing the URL thing, you can find us out there. We're on all the social medias, even TikTok. We're a conservation organization. So we're certainly, hunting is a big part of our mission, ensuring the future of wild deer, wildlife habitat, and hunting. But we also are a natural resource conservation organization. So we do a lot of habitat work, a lot of education. We interpret a lot of the great deer science that's going on out there. We have a new hunter program called Field to Fork. We're working with the U.S. Forest Service to improve access and habitat on public lands all across the country. And actually, I think we have 4 or 5 employees right here in Pennsylvania. So we're also local to folks that may be hearing this from Pennsylvania. But yeah, we're doing a lot. Check us out for sure, and I think you'll like what you see.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I just happened to have this on my desk, Nick. The annual NDA whitetail report or deer report is one of the best publications that comes out every year. The work that you guys do in compiling, harvest data and like buck age harvest data and trends and disease impacts and major regulatory changes and all that stuff, taking a comprehensive view of the deer management landscape every year is a really valuable tool for people like me. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Yep.
And Travis, hey, I don't know if 30 seconds is enough. I mean, Game Commission does a lot, but you got your elevator pitch for the Game Commission for all the potential resident hunters and non-resident hunters out there. What is your recommendation for them?
Right. Well, I mean, with the Pennsylvania Game Commission, we're the state's wildlife agency. Our mission is to manage and protect our wild birds and mammals, not only for current generations, but future generations as well. And part of our mission is promotion of hunting and trapping in that. Our website is www.pa.gov/PGC. We also have a 24-hour dispatch center. That's our main number. All calls to the agency are routed through dispatch, and the number there is 1-833-PGC-HUNT. Should you need anything, give us a call. Track me down. I'm easy to track down.
Well, I'll tell you what, the nice thing too about the Game Commission is with the newer, it's not new anymore. I guess it's been a handful of years, but with your Huntfish PA website, it's easy to get licenses online. You can have those sent right to your door. And I actually do that because I'm lazy and I don't like to wait in line at the Cabela's in Hamburg. And I'd rather just pay the extra $2 every time I buy a tag. I was very pleasantly surprised. I got 3 antlerless licenses for 4C this year. Travis, I vow to you right now in front of all these witnesses and Nick, to hold my feet to the fire, I am going to fill those 3 antlerless tags because it needs to be done. That would only account for 1 doe and her 2 fawns of the 100 does that I saw with 2 fawns this spring. So I'd barely be doing a drop in the bucket to help out these farmers in my area. So I'm going to do it. I am going to fill that freezer to the gills. And hopefully some of you who are listening, come on out. Come kill some deer. Don't call me personally and ask me to guide you. But I'm telling you, if I'm in a good mood, I might point you in the right direction and tell you somewhere where you can go find some deer. So, guys, I can't thank you enough for joining us. It was a good, fun time. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you both the best of success this fall.
Thank you. Thank you. Back up.
Thanks for downloading the Bowhunter Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Pick up the latest issue of Bowhunter magazine on your local newsstand or connect with us online at bowhunter.com.